You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. I'm your host, Steve Adams, otherwise known as Mighty Blue. This is episode number 393 of the podcast, and today we have one of the youngest thru-hikers we've ever spoken with on the show. Laura Howe, or Moonpants, is a remarkably mature young woman, and at the age of just 18, she completed a thru-hike of the AT earlier this year. I was struck by her maturity and her bravery in how she took this on, and we'll hear from Laura in a minute. With just two members of our Mighty Blue class of 23 still out there, after the two epic finishes of Mark Carpenter and Mary Marks in the last week or so, we get updates from both Jessica and Joanne as they head in different directions on the trail. Jessica will be on after Laura, while Joanne will close out the show today, as I've had horrendous technical difficulties putting this particular show together, and I've decided to omit the next part of the reading of Then the Howl Came by George Stephanos. This is mainly to avoid a heart attack on my part, rather than my apparent laziness. We'll pick up with George again next week. Also today, and I mentioned something about it last week, we have a special guest who's joining the network for a brand new podcast, starting next week. He'll be introducing himself and the podcast between our two class of 23 members. So first, let's meet Laura Howe, or Moonpants. Today we've got one of the youngest thru-hikers we've ever had in our nearly 400 episodes of the show. This is Laura Howe, or Moonpants. I'll ask you about that name in a minute. Hey Laura, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for wearing your summiting hat, which nobody can see right now, but it's a pretty cool thing. Why are you Moonpants?
I'm Moonpants because I hiked in a pair of my wind/rain pants that were waterproof for most of the trail that lost that
of course,
feature eventually. I had made them. So they were these like big baggy silver pants with gold stripes on the sides. And nice. Every time I put them on, one of the people I hiked with my first couple weeks, his name was Big Willie Dog. He would go, she's getting her space pants out or her moon pants out.
All right.
And I liked it.
Yeah, cool. So you made your rain pants. Did you make any other gear?
Not really. I was in a bit of a week or two before I left. I thought it would be fun to make pants. I didn't actually intend them to be functional. I was just trying to make parachute pants for stylistic reasons, I guess I'd say. And they turned out to be waterproof. And I was like, sweet, these are lighter than my rain pants. So I'm going to take them with me. Cool.
Very cool. As I say, you're one of our younger hikers. You're 18, aren't you? That's right.
Yeah. Oh, and the pants were also see-through a little bit if I wasn't wearing.
There you go.
So
that's why he called you Moonpants.
Yeah.
Because you're excellent.
It wasn't as noticeable. I didn't wear them that way.
We often talk about, you being 18, for a lot of us, the option to go doesn't come that early in our lives. For many people, they get involved in the I wouldn't say rat race, but they get on the, maybe it's a rat race. I don't know, but they get involved in life as it kind of is. So, and we often talk about the right time for somebody to hike. How did that window open up for you so young?
I was planning on going to school. I had registered for a college that I was going to go to. I thought I was going to study environmental science there, and I will finish college. I'm working on it. But over the summer before I was going to go away to school, I had been thinking about the AT for a few years, and I had a friend that had done it the year before, and I had been in school for a semester already because I graduated high school a semester early, so I went to college for a semester.
Sure.
And just that summer period, I was like, I really don't want to go out to school next year and be in school for the next 4 years at the same place. So that summer, one of my friends and I it was a pretty quick, like passing by conversation of, do you want to just hike the AT next year? And it was a pretty easy choice to make. We ended up going to community college locally for that semester after because we still had the summer to winter period.
Sure.
We both took EMT courses there and just a bunch of like general studies classes, core classes that are going to be easily transferable. And community college also is a lot more affordable than
Yeah, of course,
an
yeah.
out-of-state university.
So when you went to your folks and said, I kind of want to quit college and go on the AT, that can't be an easy conversation to have.
It wasn't easy, but it wasn't hard. It was more of a I've always I've always been pretty independent, so it was more of a I'm gonna hike the AT, and they were like, "No, you're not." Like, what do you mean? They didn't really believe me, but I had already at the point when I decided I was deferring. I think they were happy that I was going to be closer to home. I was like, "Well, I'll go to community college for at least a semester more, so I'll have been in college for a year, and then I'll go hike after that." And I don't think they thought I was going to go hike the trail, but they weren't super against it. They were worried, they had their concerns, but they weren't outright like, "Oh no, we don't want you doing that."
But you know, you're a very different generation, and believe me, 3, 4, 5 years at your age is quite a significant amount of your life. So
yeah,
if you've done it in 24 or 28, whatever, it's probably less a concern. Were they concerned for your safety because you've been hiking for some time, haven't you?
on trail or prior to trail?
Well, I say you've been hiking for some time before you went on trail. So
Yeah.
they knew what you could do, did they? In terms of your abilities in terms of hiking.
Yeah, they knew I was pretty competent in the outdoors. I spent a lot of time outside growing up, and I got really into hiking when I was 14 or 15. My cousin, she was 16 and she had her license, and her friends didn't want to go hiking, so she would take me hiking. And we did a lot of hiking in the Whites together. She's working on her 48 still. Her name is Lauren.
Okay.
And so she was like a big part in why I got into it. And we would go backpacking together, and that was like a lot of my first experiences. I also worked at a 4-H camp. It's called Bryant Pond 4-H Camp and Learning Center. And from when I was 14 years old, I had done a junior Maine guide program there, which was a really great program. I totally recommend it to like 15 to 18-year-olds, I believe they take now. And I stayed at the camp after that.
Look at you, passing on advice age 18. Excellent.
Yeah, I volunteered the
Right.
summer, like
Nice.
after that program. And then I stayed as a counselor, and I kept coming back every summer. I'm actually here right now. I wasn't planning on being back this summer, but I finished my hike earlier than I expected, and I gave them a call, and I was like, "Hey, do you guys need any help?" And I've been helping out in the kitchen and occasionally with some camp groups just before I move out west.
Well, from memory, helping out in the kitchen is what you need to do when you go through the Whites, isn't it? In the huts,
Yeah.
Scrub pans to get some crappy old cold porridge, oatmeal, don't you?
My work first day was not bad at all. I did one at Lake of the Clouds, and we just like swept and cleaned up the dining room pretty much. The crew was super nice. I think it depends on like how many hikers are there and kind of how they're all feeling too. I can see it getting a little rough, like in peak hiker season.
Well, I tell you what, it's amazing how much the attitude of the staff improved from my 2014 hike to my 2019 hike. They were so much nicer in 2019. In 2014, they treated us like crap, to be honest with you. Maybe it's just a bunch of old guys turning up that, they didn't like us. But, I found them so lovely in 2019 and so helpful. So I'm glad that's a trend that's continuing.
I even knew people that I was hiking with that like everyone has such different experiences because it's all you're all just people.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really easy to rub someone the wrong way. I definitely had like one night where there was 3 of us at one of the huts, and I won't say which hut, but it was like pretty nasty weather outside, and they only take 2 work first days, so I can't blame them for saying no. I get it. But I ended up camping in some pretty bad weather. Yeah, I'd asked and they were like, "Well, you can you can duke it out with your friend over the work first day." And I was like, "I'm not going to leave. Like, we're not going to ditch each other to make one go camp in this weather. Like, it's really cold outside and pouring rain, and we're not going to send the other one out to go camp by themselves." That sucks.
Wow. So so you'll ditch the work first day, did you?
Yeah, so 2 of us the 2 of us went and camped, and we were up. We had a wet night that night, but like just there, the trees are a lot smaller because you're at like above 3,500 feet, and the fog up there is just very wet and kind of comes through. So it doesn't matter if you have a tarp over you, you're gonna be wet. And our friend took a work first day.
So that's interesting. So your friend took the work for stay, and you guys went out in the. I bet you had a few words with them, didn't you?
Yeah.
So you say you've been hiking for some time. So what is it about hiking that does it for you? Is it just being out in the outdoors? Because you talked about doing college for environmental studies. So
Yeah,
you have that thing, don't you, within you?
yeah. I mean, like my time at the 4-H camp in the summers was a big part of it. Just like being able to sleep outside all summer, and like whether I was in a bunkhouse or a cabin or at a site. Like we have some sites. We have bunkhouses and cabins, but there are also sites where the camp groups that you have are like sleeping in tents, or they're sleeping under tarp shelters or debris shelters,
Right.
depending on the type of program it is. And just having that ability, being able to like spend my summers outside, I was like, I love this. This is cool.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to spend mellow time outside, but what really the exercise is a good part of it too. I just love to be moving around. The trail it was really cool to walk all day. It
Yeah,
was fun.
I certainly didn't walk all day. I walked as little as possible, but I kind of got there at the end of the day, and I was always exhausted.
Yeah.
But I know I don't ask young guys this, so I apologise in advance to anybody who thinks I'm being sexist. But you are a young woman, and there are certain issues you need to think about and address when you're out there. Once your parents took seriously the fact that you were going, how did they address your safety, or as I say, did they feel that you were contained or self-controlled enough to be able to work it out to make sure you were with somebody sometime?
They knew I had a lot of like good outdoors skills. I don't think they really doubted any of my outdoors skills themselves. Like they weren't worried about me being alone in the woods. They were more
Right.
worried about other people, I would say. So it was definitely, we did have some conversations, and I got a Garmin. I like Garmins. I use them at the camp. Like the camp uses them, so I was familiar with them that way. And I have a lot of friends that use them. And I got that before I left for my hike, because I was like, okay, like if I'm going to be gone for that long, I can see how
That
it
is sensible.
will bring people peace of mind.
Yes.
And I did have to use my Garmin at one point, like for the SOS feature, but other times, like it was great to be able to send messages when I didn't have service. So that was part of it. I've also been in situations where I'm around like sketchy people and I send a message on my Garmin because I don't have service, and I'm like, hey, this is a description of this person. Like I'm going to check in with you in a couple hours. But really on trail wasn't where I ran into the biggest safety concerns. When I was hiking by myself or on solo stretches, I wouldn't really go to shelters. I'd just camp alone,
Right.
just at some stealth spot, or I'd pull off whenever I was tired or when it started raining. Because if I go to a shelter, I don't want to have to, like, if I get there and I don't know someone there and they give me a bad feeling, I don't want to have to walk another 5 or 10 miles. That's not fun.
Yeah. So you mentioned sketchy people in that. Are you because you're confident in your skills in the woods? Were you confident that you would know how to cope with that and say you would camp elsewhere, or did you feel threatened sometimes?
Never on trail. I did. There was when I was going through the Smokies with a group, there was one person that definitely freaked out several hikers, but thru-hikers are great. Like we all grouped up pretty much.
Sure.
I went through the Smokies with a group of 4 or 5 people. And we would all wait for each other and check in and make sure that like we knew where this one hiker was.
Right.
So hikers are good about communicating that. And that was the only time and like we would never be alone with this person. And that was the only time on trail that I felt threatened by someone on trail.
Cool.
There were times where like people would ask me where I was going or be upset that I wasn't telling them where I was camping, but I didn't feel threatened. I was just like, I'm not telling you. I'm leaving now.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
You just have to be. I think with everybody in a city, you have to be aware of where you're going. So it's no different from that. And I'm glad you felt comfortable, because I would hate people to think because they're a young woman they shouldn't look at the trail. You've come through it quite totally unscathed, and you look so happy all your pictures out on the trail as well. So I'm sure you had a great time. And once you got going, when we spoke before, you talked about your parents being supportive. In fact, you said you actually got closer to them while you were hiking. Why was that?
Yeah. I think the space was good. I've always had plenty of my own personal space. I would go hiking all the time growing up, and I would stay with friends, and I lived by myself mostly for a little bit, like the past 2-ish years, but I would always been in the same like town, same state. that sort of thing. And I think having that big space, the miles distance is arbitrary, but knowing that I can't just drive 10 minutes and go chat with them if I need to,
Sure.
I don't know. It helped a lot. I still like I would have a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I would have periods of time where I wasn't really talking to people because I was with people on trail or I was by myself and I was having fun by myself. But when I
You
did,
sound so self-contained. It's remarkable, have that be so self-contained at that age. And yet, once again, it's not meant to sound patronising. I just love it. One of the things that I found, and people have heard this show before, know that I'm so impressed by the women I've met out there who take control of their lives, and they're not prepared to let anything get in the way of enjoying themselves out on trail. And I just think they're stronger and stronger hikers for it. We follow our class of 23 this year. There were more women started than men. No, it was about equal. More men started than women. But now there's more women on the trail. More men have stopped hiking.
that's awesome.
Because of injuries and stuff like that. But, I love the fact that the women feel empowered to go out there and enjoy it. And the fact that a young woman can go out there and enjoy it, I think speaks volumes actually for the community on the trail that you would feel quite comfortable with most of the people out there.
Yeah, I felt comfortable with most people out there for sure. I do wish I met more women or like solo female thru hikers along my hike, but the ones that I did meet, I really enjoyed. They were just important people on my hike. Like if I did get a chance to hike with them, I felt like the conversations were pretty, I don't know, we're able to relate to each other pretty well, and it's just nice. But I found that I got along pretty well with almost anyone that I would hike with, and I was able, when I got back on trail, I had to get off.
We're going to come to that why you got off in a minute. Yeah.
But I had to get off for a bit. But when I got back on with a girl named Canary, who I met her back in Pennsylvania, but I met her on the phone through Fresh Ground. He put us on the phone together and said, "You two like each other. Like you guys should chat." And she was wonderful. And I was lucky enough to be able to finish my hike with her and a group of other people. So that was really cool.
Now, you said you finished your first semester at college. When did and you started quite early? I've got my date.
I did a year at college.
Oh yeah, okay. Your first year at college. So you started on the 14th of February, was it?
Yeah. So the 15th was my first.
Was that because you was limited because of the time you had? Because you thought you were going back to college, or what?
No, I wanted to start in January initially, and I was talked down from that plan. So that's why I started in February, because I was like, well, I want to leave in January, and like no one wants me to do that, and I'm inclined to do my own thing, but also I have a lot to pull together to get myself ready for. I mean, I didn't have a ton to pull together, but I had stuff at home that I kind of had to get out of the way, and I wanted to work a little more. So February was just kind of the next closest. I asked one of my friends to pick a number between like 10 and 25 to decide which day that I was going to leave. Yeah. And I started
as arbitrary as that.
Yeah, very arbitrary. And I started with my friend Emma. We hiked together for the first 700 miles, but she was a part, like that decision-making process was the two of us together, initially wanting to leave in January and then being like, okay, like we can stick around for a bit.
So you set out with your friend Emma. Tell us about those early miles. Did you get into a rhythm straight away? Were you both equal hikers in terms of your ability to go through the day pretty quickly? Because you finished this very quickly. You started on, I think, the 14th of February, and you finished on the 15th.
Was my first day on the trail because I did the approach trail on the 14th. Right. But the 14th.
And you finished the 2nd of July this year.
Yep.
2nd of July, which is pretty fast. I mean, very fast actually. So were you hiking pretty fast speeds together?
When we started, we were doing like 10 to 15, maybe less. We were at a very similar pace. We had done a ton of hiking back at home together in the Whites. So we were at pretty comparable like points. And we also lived a similar life because we were both taking similar classes. And then we both were in that EMT course, which was just a huge time suck. And I'm so glad we both took it, but we were tired from our semester. And at first it would be like we would just sleep so much. We would start hiking around maybe like 10 or 11 in the morning. And
really?
Yeah. And we'd usually get into camp around like, I guess anywhere between 2 and 7 p.m. Cause like we were friends. It was fun. I mean, we still are friends, but like hiking with your friend it's so easy to just be distracted. Like we could
I'm
stop whenever
sure.
we wanted and just
I'm
chat or
sure.
sit on the side of the trail and be like, yeah, this is awesome. So we weren't super focused on the miles. Like I didn't have any of that in me. It grew on me after a month or two of like, oh, like I have to go this far today. But at that point we were like, we're going to walk until we're done walking. Um,
Nice.
and we had planned like 4 or 5 food boxes to be sent to us. They weren't full resupply boxes or anything. We packed them the week before we left and like
Sure.
found some addresses that seemed like they'd be a few days apart. And we were pretty much planning 10 to 15 miles for that first few weeks. We did our first like 20-mile day together on trail in the Smokies.
Wow.
And after that, it was kind of a steady incline, which was cool. We got into, I remember the Grayson, by the time we were in like the Grayson
That's about
Highlands, that
500
area.
miles. About
Mhm.
500 miles, yeah.
Yeah, we were happy with like, I think 24 would have been our biggest day at that point.
That's still good. You know,
And
you built up to it, which is important anyway.
yeah, and we would stay kind of consistent, which was
But I've
good.
always been interested in how people hike together. You know, I think one is compromising on behalf of the other. So when you got on the trail together, was it as you'd hoped it would be, or was it different to what you thought it would be like?
I had a great time. As far as I know, she had a great time too. We're still really good friends. And yeah, it was definitely, I didn't have many expectations for the AT. I wasn't the type to like do a ton of research and then I made sure I had my maps. I started with paper maps actually, but I ditched those because everyone I hiked around was like, no, we don't use paper maps. We use Far Out. And I was like, oh, this is super easy. And the trail goes north. So if I just follow the white blazes the whole time, like I'm not super worried about the maps.
But didn't you find that sometimes you go for quite a while without a white blaze and you start thinking, have I come the wrong way? There were certain places, certainly in Shenandoah, I thought, I haven't seen one for a long time. And
I did okay in Shenandoah, but I coming out of Damascus, I was with Emma at this point, Bassett Trayson, and we were leaving Damascus around 7 or 8 p.m. and we were going to hike 12 miles because our friend, we were into night hiking at that point. Yeah.
Oh, well, you're right. Oh, gosh.
Our friend who we hiked with our first month and a half or two was 12 miles ahead of the next shelter. And we were supposed to leave 7 hours prior, right? But we were with other friends in town and they were, this guy, Phaedrus, super nice. He was like, I'm making dinner for everyone. You guys have to stay for dinner. And the Broken Fiddle, they were like, yeah, you guys can hang out. Like we asked and everything. And they were like, yeah, thank you for asking. You guys can spend the day here. Like, and so we stayed for dinner because we didn't want to, I mean, dinner sounded fun. One, don't decline free food.
Of course,
but we wanted to spend time with people that we enjoyed. And so after dinner, we were like, yeah, we're going to hike 12 miles. And we hiked, I think, 10 or 11 miles at that point. And we got back to the sign that said, you're 6 miles from Damascus. And because we had gotten turned around at some point in the night.
Awful.
And that was really sad. And we set up camp there and we just slept like on the hill. We were in hammocks. So,
you were? I didn't realize that. Okay. So I've just recently been converted to a hammock, even though I never started hiking until I was 61 rather. What do you think? What have you always been a hammocker, or is this a recent thing for you?
At the summer camp that I work at. So I would say I've always been a hammocker because that's how I sleep here. Although my hammock setup on trail is super different than here. I started with a tent. I shared a tent with my friend and that was fine. I didn't mind sharing space. We did really well together, but if one of us wanted to spend the night in a different spot, that didn't work. And sharing all of our gear was like fun, but if one of us wanted to go somewhere else or be somewhere else or eat lunch in a different place, we were like, oh, like this isn't as convenient to share all of our gear. So we split up our stuff and we both ended up with hammock setups. I just prefer it, especially if I'm traveling solo. I think I could totally be convinced if a tent came my way and it was a single person tent that was really lightweight, I would totally, there are situations where I'd prefer a tent, like if there are no trees or if it's really, really cold outside.
Yes, certainly if there's no trees, yeah.
Yeah, but I love my hammock. It's super comfortable. Most of the time, I'd only set up the tarp if it was storming or if I was with a ton of people and I was like, this is my house. Like, don't come in. This is my night.
I know what you mean. I still feel that way sort of about the hammock, but more my tent. I know when I shut my tent up at night, I know I feel like I'm in and home and secure. It's a funny feeling to have that when you get in there. So you mentioned you hiked with your friend for 700 miles, and you're still friends, which you said about 3 times now. Mm-hmm. What was that discussion like? Did you decide you wanted to go your separate ways for some reason?
It was kind of a conversation that happened over time. It was around mile 4. I think we were in Irwin, Tennessee when we were like, okay, we definitely need to split up our gear. And we weren't mad at each other or anything. It just, we had a lot of instances where one of us would want to go somewhere else, and we'd be like, that would be totally fine. And I could see you in the morning, except like you have the stove or you have the tent.
Yes.
So we just kind of agreed. We were like, we're going to get our separate setup sent to us, and our tent also, one night we were in a storm, and it was a very big wind rainstorm sort of thing. And like the the zipper kind of like exploded. So the zipper was broken on the rain fly, and we were like, dear. All right, like guess we're sending the tent home. That's a good reason to send the tent home. Yeah. So that helped. And having separate gear was really nice because I could just like be more independent with my gear. So if we did want to spend the night elsewhere, it was good. And we started to camp like within a few miles of each other, because one of us might want to go a little bit farther one day. And,
sure.
And it wasn't like, we've always been really good about space. I don't think I would not start a long trail probably with anyone else. I couldn't think of someone that I would want to start a long trail with, or with someone that I would be able to start one with and also successfully separate from and still be, because it's hard to split up from people on your hike, especially if you start.
That's what I was thinking. You know, you've grown very close. You're close already as friends. You've grown very close on the trail. You grow closer, I think, with people on the trail. So that moment it came, you decided to literally go your separate ways, and you weren't around each other after that. Do you go fast? Does she go faster? What happened?
I went ahead, but it was a good thing to happen. She had been having some hip problems for a long time, and so because of that injury, like I was at a point where I was like, I want to see how far I can hike, and I want to start hiking farther. And she was having problems with her hips, and I didn't want to, I mean, it sucks to like see your friend having that problem, but it's also unfortunate. We stayed together for a couple weeks, because you don't just, when someone gets hurt, you don't just ditch them.
No, quite right.
But every day was kind of, at that point, it was like a compromise of I was hiking a little shorter and she was hiking farther, and it wasn't really fair to either of us, because as much as it sucks to be dragged along, it also sucks to stop short. And we talked about it, and it was a pretty easy conversation. We had talked at one point, like before we started, about how like if one of us was injured, we wouldn't expect the other one to wait. So it kind of fell in that category, but we still had like a good conversation about it. And we were like, we have our own gear, and we're still like, we're still on the same trail. Like we can kind of stay in touch.
Did she finish?
Have service. Yeah, she did recently. The trails are really bad in Maine.
Yes. So you probably missed all that, the bad weather, didn't you? Or you probably had a lot of heat.
The entirety of June poured. It was raining the entire time. The trails were worse by the time she was a couple weeks behind me, and the conditions definitely worsened significantly. So there were a bunch of spots that just weren't passable at all. So like you have to go around. But it was unfortunate. I ran into like rivers that I could not cross at all. And
that's what I want to talk about, because you mentioned earlier on your Garmin, you had to press the SOS. So tell us what happened.
I was by myself after Gorham, New Hampshire. I'd been hiking with people that I knew, or like I'd been hiking with around the same people for a long time. Right. But one guy I had hiked with him, his name was Bath. I hiked around him for Waynesboro, Virginia to Gorham, New Hampshire. And generally, if I were to take a day off or vice versa, like, you know, you catch up with people in 4 or 5 days. Of course, yeah. But that time I had been having a rough time on trail for a bit, just like it was pouring all the time and I wasn't super happy. And I decided I was going to take a 0 because I was also having really bad problems with my feet, and they just needed to not be on trail. So that was the point where I kind of lost my group, and there were not a lot of hikers around because it was such bad weather.
Wow.
So I didn't really see any hikers for a little over, it might have been a week, I'm not sure about the time frame, but from Gorham, New Hampshire to a little after Stratton, I saw 2 hikers, Helium and Lefty. They were super nice. I had met them back in.
That's not a good. That's not a good time to be on your own, is it? That's not an easy area to be hiking, is it?
No, it wasn't great. It was nice to see them. I'd see them like once during the day. We didn't always camp. We didn't camp together. But I'd be within a few miles of them because I
Right.
was just doing whatever
Sure.
I was doing. And same way for safety, you won't tell someone where you're going, even if you
Sure.
know. Like I
Sure.
didn't know ever, so I would
Right.
just
Yeah, it's easy for you. Yeah.
yeah, I would end up wherever I did. But they had waited for me at that river the day before because we started in the same spot. And I didn't realize that there was a river crossing or that they were waiting for me. And I didn't have their numbers because I see people every day, so I don't think to get their phone numbers. And I stopped at a shelter that day that was a couple miles before the river crosser was I think it's pronounced Orbeton. I stopped at, I think it was Poplar Ridge. It might have been called Poplar Ridge. And I stopped to take a nap at noon. I was going to take a nap for an hour or two. My phone alarm didn't go off, so I woke up at like 6 p.m.
Oh
I was super
wow!
exhausted.
You had a
And
6-hour nap.
yeah, and it had been pouring rain for over a day at this point, just
Wow.
torrential downpours. And I was like, I can't keep hiking right now because I'm not going to hike another 8 miles before it's dark because it's 6 p.m. And that was where the next shelter was. So I decided to do it in the morning. And they waited for me that day in the rain because the river was really bad that day, but crossable. And they waited for me for like a couple hours that I
Bless them.
found out
Bless
later.
them.
But
Yeah,
it was
nice.
very nice of them.
Yeah.
And I was able to get their number through other hikers and reach out. But that next day, I got there at about 9 a.m. and the water was up above my waist at the
Wow.
point where it was to cross. And it's usually like ankle, shin deep, I believe.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Um,
Yeah.
and I was like, there's no way I can get across this. I knew that. I was supposed to meet my dad
Was
for
it? By the way,
Father's Day.
was it rushing? Was the river really rushing as well?
Yeah, it was like a rapid. I was
Wow.
so I didn't want to get in it. I cried a little bit when I got down there because I was like, I just don't know what to do. I'm
Well,
by
that added to the
myself.
water. What do you mean crying a bit?
Well, I didn't.
Water, isn't
No, it was not. I shouldn't have tried to cross that river.
Wow.
But I bushwhacked like 6/10 of a mile upstream because I thought there was a bridge because I saw a bridge on a map, but it had been torn out, and it took me like an hour to get up there because it was just really thick to walk through, and it was like a swamp. And when I got up there, it was still really bad up there, but I could see bushes in the middle of the river, and I thought it might be shallow over there. It
Oh
wasn't
dear.
bushes; it was like the tops of really small trees.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I was on some stepping stones at first. I don't think I would have tried to cross it had I not. I had no cell service down there, and I hadn't had it for a few miles. And I was supposed to meet my father that morning. I hadn't seen him in probably a month or so. And I was going to meet him for Father's Day and we were going to hike together.
Sure. Nice.
So I was like, I can't just stop at this river. Like, I have to go meet my dad, and I'm 10 miles behind that. So, and I do, well, it's okay because I did get in the river, but I'm just really grateful that I got out of the river as well.
So what
I
happened?
didn't expect
So what
to
actually
be.
what actually happened there? Were you swept away?
Yeah, I got in, and at first it was like waist deep, and then it was above my waist, and I was on stepping stones. But by the time you're 4 feet from the banking, you can't turn around. There's not like to turn around would have meant me falling in. So I was like,
Sure.
well, I think I'm gonna fall in either way. And I tried to keep taking steps on the stones. But it was just a really fast current, and you can't, like, I was finding the stones in the water with my poles.
Sure.
I
Sure.
couldn't see them. And it was a super fast current. I'd like I didn't know how it felt to get swept away until I was swept away, I guess. I ditched my backpack in the middle of the river because I didn't want to get caught up on anything. Got stuck on a little like rocky outcrop in the middle. And I left my bag there, and I grabbed my Garmin, and my phone I put it in a plastic bag that morning for some reason. I never do that, but I had.
Jeez. Jeez.
So I'm glad I grabbed my Garmin because I was thinking at that point that I could there was like 10 or 15 feet more to get through. I was thinking I could jump in and get across really fast, even though it looked bad, and pull my backpack to me with like my rope. And I let go of the rope very quickly that I had tied to my backpack right when I got in the water because like I was cold. I had to jump in to get across because I couldn't just sit in the middle. Like there was no dry ground there. It was just a couple rocks and water between them. And I was just in the river for a while after that because I didn't want to pull my bag in after me. And I was able to get out, thankfully. And I pressed the SOS button on my Garmin and I jogged pretty far. There's a logging road on the other side of the river. And I ran like to the AT intersection and I didn't have any cell service and I've never used the SOS button. I didn't know if it would work. So I went north on the AT like for a couple miles and then I did have cell service and it was just a very confusing I'm glad like someone came to get me, which was good. The warden service picked me up on the logging roads, but like 911 and Garmin and the warden service were all telling me like slightly different things because they weren't like it wasn't all.
Yeah, it wasn't meshed together. Yeah. Jeez, that must be scary. Must have been scary for you. Did you go home then, or what would you? And did you say you got your pack back or not?
I got it back a few days later.
Right.
I would not have gotten back on trail if I had lost my bag.
Right. Okay.
Which, like, I hate to admit, but there's just not like I could replace some of the stuff in it, and I even have other bags at home, but I think that would have been enough of a hit. I didn't want to get back on trail. I'm
sure. Did you have any other scary river crossings once you did get back on?
I had a couple that were really high, but they were slow. Like they don't sweep you down or get you stuck under trees, underwater. They're just slow, so you're fine. And the Kennebec opened like the day before I went through it. And in the 100-mile wilderness, there were some that were very scary to me, and I went around them on logging roads. Yeah. I would love to do the 100-mile wilderness sometime when it's not a swamp and the river crossings aren't all dangerous.
It's a great part of the trail.
I was not interested in trying to cross the rivers in the 100-mile wilderness because they were not great.
Can I ask you, why did you go back? That must have been a real scary experience for you. You know, you could have been killed. I mean, it's possible, I guess. So why did you go back?
Well, I wanted to quit. I told, right when I got off trail, I told one of my Canary, she was 4 or 5 days behind me. I told her that I would be getting back on. She had reached out to me, I believe, but I told her I wanted to get back on trail with them because she offered for me to join their group as well.
Nice.
And I made sure I did that the first day or two because I knew that if I didn't make that sort of plan, I'd be home for a few days and I'd be I don't really want to do this.
Good thinking.
It was tougher once I got home because at first I was I don't know how I'm going to get back on trail. Where's my backpack? I have to get that so that I can go back to trail. And then I got home and I was I have to go look for my backpack, but I don't want to. And once I get my backpack, I still don't really want to go back. And I also, I don't know, I didn't want to quit.
It's a draw though, isn't it? I can entirely understand why you would want to get back. You were near the end anyway. You've had this great adventure. You know, why wouldn't you want to get back? So yeah, I can totally get that. So you got back and you got to Katahdin. Were you physically beat up at the end? How did you feel when you finished?
Pretty beat up. My knees were shot. They still are pretty bad.
Really?
Yeah. I think I don't know. I feel long distance hiking just does a toll on the body in general.
Tell me about it. You'll be my age and do it. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I would wake up every morning and everyone would make fun of each other because you get out of your hammock or your tent or whatever and you kind of stumble to wherever you're going because you're so stiff. But after a couple miles, you're good and you feel good and you're walking again. Yeah. And the first couple miles, they hurt and you stiffen up so fast. And my body still does that. I never used to stiffen up the way that I do now that I've been a thru-hiker. It's nice. It reminds me of hiking, but it was tough. I've been hiking a bit in the Whites since getting home, and I've gone on shorter day hikes, stuff like that. And I definitely noticed that things get stiff fast. And I'm why? I walked 5 miles, not 20.
That's funny. So
I was pretty beat up.
Having done the 80 so young, do you think you're going to do the Triple Crown by the time you're 25, or is this something you're not going to do for a while? Or are you going to? I know you want to carry on being in the outdoors. In fact, you told me the other day you're actually going to Montana for a period of time as well. So, you going to do the Triple Crown or other big hikes?
I'm not making any commitments right now. I'm definitely interested in other long trails, but there are trails other than the PCT and CDT that are pretty interesting. I'll be really close. Like, I'll be in the Pacific Northwest area, which is really exciting. They're just I wanted to get on the long trail when I got home really bad. I was like, I want to get on the long trail next week. That was a big thing for me, but everything was still really flooded and it
Yeah.
kept getting flooded, and Vermont was not in a condition that I wanted to be hiking through it in. um,
Yeah.
but I could see myself doing the other two trails, the CDT and the PCT. It definitely won't be next year. I have some life stuff to
Right,
attend
college.
to and sort out.
Got to sort
Yeah,
college out for a start as
yeah.
well. Well, look, I'm so glad you went. I'm so glad you've come to talk to us, because you're one of the. I think you're one of the first of the successful through hikers this year we've spoken with. So I appreciate you coming on the show. And if you do go on another trip, while you're still in your teens, let us know and we'll get you back on the trail.
Sweet.
Thanks a lot. Cheers then.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I loved her ferocious independence and sheer doggedness to do what she wanted. As you know, I've always been impressed with the Appalachian Trail women, and Laura falls very neatly into that category. And even as an 18-year-old, she is still suffering the physical after effects of this grinding hike. I was also interested in how the absence brought her closer to her parents. It made me think that when we're thinking of hitting a long trail, we're not prepared for some of the many unexpected things that will impact us upon the way. For Laura, and for most hikers, the outcome is normally very positive, but as I often say, be careful what you wish for. Things never go exactly as you expect them to. Now Jessica, and a long emotional journey continues, with more pulls upon her heartstrings this week again. Here she is.
Hello.
Hey Jessica, it's me. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm good. And we actually only spoke a couple of days ago, but quite a few things have happened already. So you went over the Bigelows in a bit of weather, and I know what that means.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the worst thing we've been in, but unfortunately, views were not to be had. We started out at Route 27, and things were okay. We ended up having to do one of those fun take your shoes off, get into your camp shoes type of water crossings right away, which is not my favorite thing. But we got across fine. And then the higher we got up, it started raining and getting kind of sucked in and foggy. It's kind of that kind of fog that reminds you of the Smokies.
It's a shame, actually, because it's such a beautiful spot. And you haven't done Bigelows, have you? You haven't done as far north as this, have you?
No, I haven't really done much hiking in Maine at all before. So, right. Kind of a bummer.
Yeah, because it's one of the big memories for a lot of people out there. And it's a difficult climb as well, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. Another one.
So you then had, you went to West Carry Pond Lean-To, and you had loons, owls, and coyotes galore. So coyotes I don't think coyotes are ever good to listen to.
They don't bother me too much as long as they don't get too close. They were still fairly far off. I think everybody else that was in the shelter was a little on edge after hearing them, but we heard them kind of do their thing once, and then they were quiet for the rest of the night. But the loons were definitely out all night, singing up a storm. And then
great sound.
Yeah, definitely. Loons are like one of my favorite things about this part of the world. And then the owls chimed in at one point, and we hadn't heard owls probably since like the middle of Virginia. So it was kind of nice to hear them again.
I've just realised none of our class of 23 has mentioned the whippoorwills. Do you remember the whippoorwills?
That's funny because I had never heard a whippoorwill before this trip.
Once heard though, never forgotten.
Totally. One night down in Virginia somewhere, I can see the shelter in my mind, but I can't think of the name of it. All of a sudden, this strange noise started happening towards dusk, and I was like, okay, wait a minute, that might be it. And it sure enough it was.
Yeah. Awesome. And is West Carry Pond Lean-To, is that the one just before Harrison Camp then?
It's two before Harrison Camp. So
two before. Okay.
Yeah, the Pierce Pond one is the one right before it.
Oh, Pierce Pond. Of course it is. That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
So, and that's heading down towards the Kennebecks. But so you said you had 2 5:30 wake up calls for pancakes.
Yeah.
And as you wrote in your note, worth it. Of course it is.
Totally. Yeah. So when we were, West Carey Pond is about 10 miles from Pierce Pond lean-to. So we wanted to make sure that we got there in time to get our names on the list. So alarm went off at 5:30 and we hiked 10 miles and dropped our stuff. And then I got stuff set up while Mike ran down to the camp. And we were some of the last people because they only take 10 people a day.
Right.
So we were some of the last people on the list. So it was a good thing we did what we did to get on that list.
So you did 10 miles before breakfast?
No, we did 10 miles the day before because you have to put your name on the list the day before. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my God, 10 miles before breakfast? No way.
Yes, I could say. Yeah, that wouldn't have worked at all well. No. And then you said there's a guy at Harrison Camp. Tell us about the guy who was playing the piano.
Yeah, so I think it's the owner of the camp. So this was actually this morning. You know, we set the alarm for 5:30. We went down there, and the pancakes are insane. First of all, he does blueberry, strawberry, and apple.
Yes.
Red, white, and blue. Very patriotic.
Of course.
This giant stack of pancakes and orange juice and eggs and sausage if you want it and coffee, and it was quite the layout. But this guy Tim, I think, is the owner. I'm sorry, there's somebody running a lawnmower.
It's okay. Lawnmower? Where on earth are you?
Okay,
carry on. We'll come back.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay.
So he does this whole breakfast thing, and there were comments in Far Out about if you liked playing musical instruments, he would love to hear you. And there were also comments about the fact that his son was a Marine and unfortunately passed away, and that he did not like to discuss it and to be respectful and not bring it up.
Sure.
So we had breakfast, and there's a photo of his son in the room that you have the breakfast in, and there was a photo of his son out on one of the buildings, and we were all kind of getting ready to leave, and he just all of a sudden asked us if we would like to hear the Rhapsody that he had composed for his son, because his son passed away 5 years ago today.
Oh, wow.
And getting choked up just thinking, I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. There couldn't be, and it was beautiful. It was lovely. And so much that went into that.
You know what, though, Jessica? You didn't need any more emotion, did you, at the moment? I mean, it's been an emotional trip for you anyway. And so in playing something like that, you're going to look back upon this hike, I think, with so many emotions, many of which will be happy emotions, I'm sure. But you've had some pretty tough times out there as well. And the mere fact that you're just still doing it, you're still out there and getting there is just remarkable. And then, of course, you had to have the crossing. How was that for you?
So I don't think we've really talked about this much, but I am not the biggest fan of water.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
Yes.
So especially in Maine, right? So,
Yeah.
And I didn't even tell you about the leeches in the pond, but that's, we can leave that for another moment. But so we're coming up on the Kennebec, and the water is still running hard up here. As the trail goes along, you're kind of walking near this creek, and there were several cascades, and they were running pretty strong. We haven't seen rain in a few days, but I think, again, it's just, there's a lot of water in Maine this year.
Sure.
So, this sound of this water, and ever since we had to cross that one stream in the dark near the Kinsmans and watch that water come up, I've just been a little nervous about it. So we're getting closer, and all this water running, and I was nervous for sure. And the nice thing was, like, once we got down to the river itself, the river was pretty calm. There wasn't a lot of like whitewater.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a wide river anyway, isn't it? So it's wide enough for it to run through fairly smoothly. Is there a limited time? Is it still from, I think it's 9 a.m. till about 2 p.m., something like that?
Yeah, this time of year, and they only run it until September 30th. So,
right.
Yeah, so we were
interesting.
grateful to get there. I mean, they've got about a week left at this point.
Yeah. And how many people were waiting there when you got there?
About a dozen or so. There was quite a few.
So probably took a while. You took a while to get across then.
It did. It took a little bit. So I'm sitting there.
You know, it's one of those things. It's one of those things, though, isn't it? It's one of those things. You're actually. There's as you saw, there's a white blaze in the canoe. Yep. So you're staying on the trail, which is pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
It's just one of those kind of rites of passage of being on the trail, doing the Kennebec River. I know years ago they used to just ford it, which is just amazing to me.
Right.
And but now the benefit of the canoe, I think it's just a nice little part of it.
Absolutely.
So where are you staying now then?
We're at the Sterling Inn in Caratung.
Oh right, okay. Right, wow, you are definitely still moving on. That's great.
Yeah,
and how are you feeling? You feeling a bit stronger?
A little bit stronger. We're expecting to be in Monson probably in about 3 or 4 days.
Wow.
We're going to take a zero at Shaw's just to get ourselves together for the 100-mile. It's kind of hard.
And have you thought
to
about
believe.
that? Have you thought about that 100-mile wilderness? How are you going to manage it?
Definitely want to do the food drop from Shaw's.
Right.
Don't see any reason to try to carry that much food if at all possible to avoid it.
Sure.
I haven't looked at the map enough to say okay, we can do it in this many days. I think most people are doing 4 days to the food drop. So
right, that's right. Yeah.
Trying to figure out exactly where that's going to happen. Figured obviously we'd get more details from them once we get there. Just hoping that, knock on wood, it looks like we've got a good stretch of weather coming up. So hoping things dry out a little bit because we've still been slogging through the mud. Somebody that stayed in that shelter with us last night, the last 2-3 miles to the shelter, it was just exhausting. Mike has been calling it trail hopscotch, and I think it's the perfect way to describe it. I don't know if everybody just goes straight through it, but we're trying to keep our feet semi-dry. And
it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen, does it?
Yeah. And it's decision fatigue because could you put your foot there, and is that rock going to move? And it just goes on forever. So.
Have you had many falls, by the way, Jessica?
I had the one out of the Privy on Smart Mountain.
That was a special one, of course.
That was very special. I had one a little while back where it was just I kind of slipped a little and sat down lightly.
That doesn't count as a fall.
Okay.
I did that all the time. I mean, for me, completely stacking it was a fall, and I completely stacked it 46 times first time and 43 times second time. So.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is part of the reason why I'm so slow is because with the back injury I have, if I fall the wrong way, I'm in deep trouble.
Yes, you
are.
So
I have just been super careful, and people keep passing me, and I just have to keep telling myself, I don't care. I'm still on my feet. I'm still walking.
It's so good. Yeah, you know what? You're still going. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, look, glad you're taking you're obviously taking the rest of today off. Are you heading out again tomorrow, or are you taking a break tomorrow?
We're planning to head back out tomorrow morning. Yeah.
Okay, Jessica. Well, enjoy it. And good to see you got across the Kennebec without problems, and you had all the pancakes as well, which is even better.
It's been a good day.
All right, then. Take it easy, okay?
You too.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
So she's over the Kennebec. Always a great day. And now just several days from Monson and the start of the 100-mile wilderness. And listening to that guy playing the piano to honour his son must have been quite a moment for all those lucky enough to have been there that morning. These unexpected musical interludes, some sad, some happy, are welcome additions to any hike. I can still remember vividly Sahada Buckley, or Cloud, playing the violin during my 2019 hike when she made something up for me to record for the podcast. We were at a high point in the forest. There was fog all around, and this talented young woman produced a violin and played her heart out. It still makes the hairs stand up on the back of my neck whenever I listen to it. Now, let's listen to the newest podcaster in the Hiking Radio Network family. Now, we've got an old friend of the show dropping in with some news. This is Bruce Monson. Hey, Bruce, how are you?
Mighty Blue, it's good to talk to you.
And you, mate. Now, you and I did a podcast together 5 years ago. In fact, we actually started it, I think, in November 2017, as we tracked your preparation, in fact, your incredibly detailed preparation for your AT thru hike in 2018. So, almost exactly 5 years after you completed your thru hike, you're starting a new podcast on the Hiking Radio Network. Tell us what it's called, and then we can get into what it's all about.
Yeah, hard to believe, 5 years.
When was by the way, when was your summit date?
September 1.
Oh, okay. So the 5-year anniversary is past. Cool.
Yeah, so, it's great to be back. And, of course, we've kept up over the years.
Sure.
We talked about doing this podcast, and I'm excited to announce that we're going to start a podcast called the Platinum Blazing Podcast. And as you know, and I think probably a lot of your listeners know, I helped write a book called Platinum Blazing the Appalachian Trail the year after my thru hike. And I've just finished doing a massive update of that book, and it got me focused again on the AT community and how much I'm continuing to be drawn back to it, and thought this would be a fun way to continue to be connected to trail, and quite frankly, I'd like to use it to give back to the trail.
Nice. In what way is that going to be?
Well, the whole concept of platinum blazing really is about taking your hike, taking a thru hike and turning it into what we call a platinum experience. Through my planning for my own thru hike, I realized there were a lot of things along the trail, places and people, events, history, cultural institutions that existed between Georgia and Maine. And I wanted to take in a lot of those activities and people and places as part of my hike. If I was going to undertake such an epic journey, I really wanted to make sure I did it in a very fulsome way. So as you alluded to, I'm a big planner and preparer. And so in doing that preparation, I became aware of an awful lot of these, we laughed during the podcast when I was hiking about, I overused the word iconic. But
I've got to tell you, by the way, Bruce, in the first episode, you've overused it as well.
But there's a lot of iconic things out there. Some of them are meals, and some of them are bed and breakfast, and some of them are hostels, and some of them are blue blaze trails. And I hope people who are thinking about hiking the trail, doing a thru hike, or even a section hike, can really enhance their hike by becoming more aware of some of these exciting side trails and institutions that are out there.
And also some of the history of the trail. I know one of your sections of the trail is going to involve a little bit of history, which is quite neat as well, and kind of unusual, because I know a lot of people have talked about doing history of the trail. You've got some quite interesting stuff going on with that. So I'm not going to give it all away for the first episode yet, because it comes out soon. But I'm talking about the name Platinum Blazing, and actually it's kind of gradually seeped into the language of the trail. Why do you think that it resonates, and particularly with some of us older folk?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of dimensions to it, and if there's one thing that I really want to convey, that it's not really about having a fancy meal or staying at a great luxurious bed and breakfast. That can be part of it, and everybody gets off the trail and enjoys those things from time to time.
Sure.
But it's really not about having a big budget. Yes, if you have a big budget, you can do a few more of those things. But to me, Platinum Blazing is really about maximizing your experience. I'd like to use the old cliche, stopping to smell the roses.
Yeah.
You're out there when you go through Blood Mountain, one of your first iconic stops, places along the trail, have a little sense that this shelter, this stone shelter, was constructed years ago by the CCC, during the Depression. It was part of a bigger works program that was all over the country. And also think about the cultural aspects of the ground that you're walking on. It's called Blood Mountain for a reason. And it's called Slaughter Gap because of a reason. And when you understand that, I think it adds to your trip when you realize, well, this is one of the places where the Trail of Tears actually began. The Cherokee had a large presence in northern Georgia, and they were forced out of northern Georgia as part of the Trail of Tears. And in fact, they were forced out because they found gold in the area. And Dahlonega, a lot of people don't realize, but if you're planning a through hike and you're going to have a southern start, Dahlonega is a neat place to start. It's obviously a town not very far from Amicalola Falls. And there's a great gold history in Dahlonega. In fact, there's an old expression, there's gold in them there hills. Everyone thinks that. And
it's true in that case.
It is, but most people think that expression comes from, San Francisco, the 49ers, the gold rush out at Sutter's Mill. But that expression actually comes from the gold rush in the 1820s in North Georgia. So I think knowing some of these things, to me, made my hike more interesting and enjoyable. And I think other people will do the same. And we can go along the trail in a lot of different places and realize that different things happen. We've got Civil War history up in Maryland.
Yeah, we're walking through Americana. We're walking through Americana every day, aren't we? That is so important to know that as well. I mean, this small strip of land touches every part of America in many ways, doesn't it? There's things that have happened there long years ago, and you can just walk past it if you wish. But your idea is to much educate people, more inform people of what's out there. And one of the things actually was going to be one of my questions, but I'm glad you mentioned it. You don't see it at all elitist, do you? You're going more for the experience as opposed to the swanky hotels, because there aren't that many swanky hotels as such anyway.
That's exactly right. In fact, if you look at the cover of the book, we have a subtitle, How to Through Hike in 3-Star Luxury, and the words 5-star are crossed out, and that's meant to be a little tongue-in-cheek, a little humor, because there isn't a lot of luxury. And one of the problems I had in putting the book together was the idea of these great dining establishments. And we talk about it in the book, but some of these places aren't great, but they're great places. The food's not great. It might be a quantity, but there's a history that's grown up around a place like Bob's Dairyland in Roan Mountain, just because they've fed a lot of hikers and people have shared experiences there. There are some fine dining places, like the one in the book. It sits in a gas station site in Franklin, North Carolina, but it's fine dining there. I walked right by it. I didn't know about it, but when we put the book together, we had a panel of people to give us all this input. So not at all. I really want to get away from the idea that Platinum Blazing is about luxury or elitism. It's really about the experience. I've recently, I love all these different blazing terms like green blazing and pink blazing. And one thing I've heard recently that I hadn't heard before was bougie blazing, and it comes from bourgeois. And I like that word to focus on the more elitist luxury blazing, and platinum blazing to be a broader term to think about just embellishing your trip to make it the greatest trip you can, whether it's culinary interest or cultural interest or historical interest, geographic interest. The book is not all about spending money. We have fun with what's the best pizza or what's the best burger. But we also have a chapter on if you're going to take a blue blaze trail to go to a waterfall or a lookout, not many thru-hikers want to make those extra steps. And so
more than 200 feet and I'm done. There's no possibility of that.
I know what you mean, and I took very few too, but I did take some, and a couple I didn't take that I'm sorry I didn't take. I think the best example, I really think this is a great example, and if you're a thru-hiker thinking about it, don't forget a place called Gulf Haggis in the 100-mile wilderness. And I know I was very eager to be finished, but how many times you're going to be in the 100-mile wilderness? And Gulf Haggis is a 5-mile side trip, which is a lot of steps. But this
5 miles?
5 miles. It's a loop trail off of the AT. Yeah. But Gulf Haggis is the Grand Canyon of the East, and it's some of the most spectacular geology you can imagine. And when you're that close and you miss that, as I did, shame on me. I wish I knew more about it. I wish I had taken that side trip. But there's plenty of 0.2 and 0.3 side trips that Mighty Blue didn't take because it was more than 200 steps. But
that's right.
But they really might. I remember we had a really tough day going through Mahoosuc Notch, Mahoosuc Arm, climbing up to Old Spec. And Old Spec was a 0.3 summit off the trail. But
that's right.
Despite how hard the day had been, making that 0.3 to this unbelievable vista was worthwhile. So that's
absolutely not. 0.3, you're having a laugh, aren't you? And you're going to be setting the scene in the first episode. Obviously, it's kind of a pilot. You're going to answer what platinum blazing is, what it isn't, and why you came up with the idea, which I thought was quite an interesting one as well. So, how have you found putting an episode together so far?
Well, when we did it 5 years ago, you made it very easy. You just called me up and interviewed me. So, but technology is a bit of a challenge for a lot of people in our generation. I admit it is for me. I'm fascinated, amazed by technology, but I haven't turned my back. But it's not as intuitive as it is with our children. I say that because one thing I've really enjoyed is to work on some graphics and to work on the podcast. I've had to learn a lot about some graphic software and just about the different things we do to put this together. And I'm very much a neophyte, but it's fascinating. And at 66 years old, it's good to be engaged in something that's creative and interesting. And learning a little bit about technology when you think it's passed you by, it's been fun. But I'm going to make a lot of mistakes before we get as proficient as you are. But I'm enjoying the effort. I'm enjoying trying, and I hope it's going to be fun. It's the whole reason to do it is to have some fun.
I'm editing Bruce's show, and I listen to it when it's been recorded as well, and. I cannot tell you. I sort of wish I'd kept the outtakes of you trying to say Mountain Harbour. That was hilarious. I should have kept them, but I actually didn't keep those.
You've seen a lot of shows or movies where they've saved the outtakes and they're rather funny. You should consider that, maybe not for my show, but for somebody's show.
And while we haven't finalised the logistics behind starting a new podcast, because there are things you have to do, you can't say we're going to start it on a certain date, but our plan is to drop the first episode. Tell us when the plan is to drop it.
Well, I think the plan is to try to hit the first Wednesday of October, which is a week or so away, but I know there's some timing issues that you can't control, so hopefully by the beginning, the middle of October, we'll have the first episode up and running, and then I'd like to do this once a week. I'm planning to keep it to something like 30 minutes. I'm not going to keep the audience around as long as you do, but that seems like a good amount of time to address some issues and have some fun. So we're going to have 3 sections to the podcast: the main topic and a couple of fairly short but fun editions.
Cool. And I'm probably telling tales out of school here, but you've got a giveaway in the first episode, haven't you? And that means you're going to have to stick around to the end of the show and find out what it is. So, I'm looking forward to seeing how this works out. It's going to be fun. I've really enjoyed editing it so far as well. And I just wish you best of luck in the world with it. And I appreciate you coming on and telling us about it.
I'm part of the Hiking Radio Network, so I'm glad to be part of the empire you're building. So thanks for sticking with me, and I look forward to doing this with you for a while.
Okay, buddy. Take it easy, okay?
All right, thanks. Take care.
Cheers. Bye. So, Bruce has his second podcast on the network. If you're preparing for a hike, then it's certainly worth listening to Bruce's detailed preparation that we discussed for his AT thru hike. And the Platinum Blazing podcast will be a great addition to our network. I hope to be able to have the first episode up and running by next Wednesday, but if that doesn't happen, it will be out soon after. As I hinted in our discussion, it's more of a logistical thing involving Apple than it really needs to be, but it's always been this way. I'll certainly be posting it as soon as it's available on our Hiking Radio Network Facebook page, and Bruce will have his own site within our hikingradionetwork.com website, so I hope you all check it out. Thanks, as ever, to our wonderfully loyal donors. This week, we have to thank recurring donors, including a couple of new names, Brian Alsop, Gregory Gerpner, Jessica Diaz, Bruce Brinker, Hugh Ickrath, Melanie Swisher, and Justin Mullins. Thanks to one and all. I never take you for granted. If you'd like to help out by chipping in $1 or $5, then head on over to hikingradionetwork.com, find my podcast, and hit one of the donate buttons on the page to show your appreciation for the show. Thank you so much. Finally today, we check in with the serene Joanne Flagg, who's approaching the Grayson Highlands and about to meet the ponies. And as with Jessica, you'll hear some emotion from Joanne as well today. And it's another warning as to how the seemingly most innocuous things can impact us out on the trail and reduce us to a blubbering mess. I'll see you next week.
Hello?
Hey, Joanne.
Yeah.
I got it to work.
Oh, good.
I don't know what happened, but let's not worry about it. While I've got you here and you're recording, let's work with that, shall we?
Yes.
Well, Joanne and I have had a bit of an issue this morning. We're trying to record as she's heading towards the Grayson Highlands. And I know in the middle of the Grayson Highlands, there's a 500-mile marker, which means you'll have 500 miles to go. And one of the things you said, and I'm going to go to the end of the note you sent me, you said you got thoughts for getting home. I mean, you're going to be abandoned in Georgia, or what are you worried about? What are you concerned about?
I could have properly said how to get home or what I'm going to do to get home.
All right. Okay.
I've been daydreaming about getting a rental car and stopping on my way up through and visiting some of the places. Maybe I already said this. Some of the places I've just had a glimpse at. Like Burke's Gardens and the Luray Caverns and things like that.
So you've been through Chestnut Knob Shelter, past that, where you've got this awesome view of Burke's Garden. Isn't that amazing? Yes. It's one of my favorite sites.
Yes, I love that. And I ran into one of the Amish farmers when I was hiking up there, and
nice.
I told him I might come back up through later, and he's like, well, stop at Maddie's. My wife has a shop. It's Maddie's shop, and it's right by the general store, I guess. So that was kind of fun to meet one of the people from down in there.
And last time we spoke, you were heading towards Howe that night, actually. Tell us about that experience.
Woods Hole was really good. It had a few things about it. The bunkhouse is really neat. I stayed upstairs in there, and all of that was good. Had a nice hamburger for supper. Neville wasn't there, but I said hello to Jaws for you.
All right.
They said, Neville's not here. We had hamburgers.
Oh, bad luck. Well, you know what? That wasn't the experience you were hoping for.
And in the morning, he had made fresh homemade bread. And the sunrise was beautiful.
Yes, isn't that great? That sunrise.
Clouds down in the mountains down below. It was just beautiful. And I was writing in my journal in the evening. There were one gentleman who was doing he had thru-hiked and he was doing trail magic. and 3 other girls. And one was like, oh yeah, I'm from Massachusetts. And I'm like, you're from Massachusetts? I'm from Northfield, Mass. And I started to explain where it's from, where it is. And she's like, I'm from Northfield. We're from the same town and didn't even know each other.
It's
awesome. A small town too. It's just so funny.
It's so nice how you run across people and you have this common. Well, the common thing the thing you've all got in common, of course, is you like to hike and you enjoy being on a trail and so on. But those little serendipitous moments like that, you can't buy that, can you? It's just a great thing to think.
No, you can't. And then in the morning, it was just like, mosey around and do the things and look at everything. I didn't leave there until 10:40 in the morning.
That's all right. You're not in any hurry, are you? You're fine.
So that's why. That's one of the reasons I said that hostel hopping is hard work, because you don't want to leave the hostels, and then you have to rush to get to the next one.
I wonder what the hard work was then. So the hard work is actually once you leave the hostel, because you don't want to drag yourself away in the morning.
Yeah.
So where else have you been then? Which other hostels have you been to?
I had been to Angel's Rest and then Woods Hole, and then at Weary Feet.
Nice.
Which is a nice little farmhouse with a river down front. In the morning when Robert cooked me breakfast, there was 8 deer around the house in the fields. And
beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And just talking with him about things like those black-headed vultures that I thought were so cool. He says they'll peck the eyes out of calves as they're being born.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
I told you got to be, they were looking at you, but you never know what they're thinking, do you?
Maybe one to peck my eyes out.
Oh dear. So what about after Weary Feet then? That's actually what you probably did then, was having hostel after hostel after hostel. Were you basically getting off the trail every night?
I did those 3 nights, and then I tented on trail one night, and then I went to Burke's Garden. Oh,
did you? Now, I've never been there, and it's one I really want to go to, and I've met the lady who owns it, and the son, actually. Did you enjoy that one?
Yeah, it was very nice. There's a little Amish barn that they fixed up really sweet. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Yep. And the great thing was there is a road that goes down there, but that would have been 22 miles for me, and it was just pushing it. So I got off at 6:23, and he came and got me.
Oh.
And by doing that, I got to ride along and through the valley and see Burke's Garden.
Oh, how lovely. Yeah, I bet that was beautiful. So it does look lovely up at the top there, as I say, at Chestnut Knob Shelter. So did he take you back the next day as well, where you were?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, you always have to go back, don't you, as well? So you hit the Grayson Highlands in a couple of days, but you're looking forward to that, because I always think it's a special place. Some people really don't like the ponies, but I think it's a great place to hike over. I can tell you though, it is rocky as heck, so beware of that.
I saw that in the comments.
Yeah,
the trail's rocky, huh?
Yeah,
like
it
the
is.
Small ones that are a pain to walk on.
Not as bad as Pennsylvania. No, nothing like that. No, don't worry about that. Yeah, but it's an epic.
You knew what image I had in my head.
I knew exactly what you were thinking. Yeah, because you've been through them and they suck. And you said that a fellow hiker has found you, or was finding you, for trail magic. What does that mean?
Yes, Jer Bear. I hiked with him way back in the beginning, and he is a section hiker both here and out west. Mm-hmm. I think he's from Ohio, and he's like, I'm coming over. His son is in some sort of running ultra marathon or something.
Nice.
I'm coming over to see my son. I want to do trail magic. I'll find you. So tomorrow night he's gonna get me right as I head into the park, Grayson Highlands State Park, and do trail magic. And I'm gonna stay just made a reservation at the inn there at Grayson Highlands. So
I don't
very
even know
excited
what that is.
about that.
Yeah, you know what? It's you're definitely starting to experience the trail in a different way now, aren't you? Going to some of these hostels. I think the hostels are there are some pretty great hostels around that area as well. So I'm glad you're sort of seeing what they're like as well.
Yes.
And have you been? My idea of the trail going backwards really throws me out. Have you been through the shelter where you can order the pizza? Is it Partnership Shelter?
Oh, I just came through there yesterday, and the pizza place is closed on Monday. That's the second time I've gone through a pizza ordering place on a Monday.
Oh dear. So are you now? I was looking at the map this morning. Are you now in? You are in Virginia, aren't you? How many miles are you into Virginia now?
I would. I'm not sure how many days to Damascus. Only maybe 60.
Oh, right.
I don't know.
Nice. 60, right? Yeah, because you'll get the Virginia blues going the other way. You're just in the state a heck of a long time. Well, I certainly was, and it's a quarter of the trail. So,
yes.
but I tell you, people talk about the Virginia blues. I loved Virginia. The ridge walking is terrific in Virginia, and I think you're going to enjoy some of that as well. You got Damascus to come, hot springs. I'm trying to think what else you got. Damascus is the southernmost point because you leave Virginia just after Damascus.
So where's Hot Springs? I hear so much about Hot Springs.
That must be Tennessee, I guess. Someone tell me I'm wrong. Oh no, it's North Carolina. I think it's North Carolina.
Oh, I always thought it was Virginia.
Well, I'm so unreliable with my map going on. I mean, I can see it over my left shoulder, but if I do that, I turn away from the mic. I can't talk properly.
You do remember a lot, though. Having done it twice, you remember a lot.
Well, I remember some of it, and also, funny enough, I'm loving listening to all your experiences out there because I know what my experiences were like, and they were great in certain places you might not have enjoyed, and vice versa, which is what makes someone else's hike so interesting to me. I know that you're just experiencing this in a way that I haven't, and you will have a unique story to tell at the end. Everybody does. So now are you starting starting to wish it was going away now, or are you still relishing the hike itself?
I'm not wishing it would go away, but there's sometimes I feel like if I was done, I would be okay. But then there's that other part of me that knows there's still some great stuff to see and do.
Yes, there is. There absolutely is. Yeah. And when we spoke last week about the scrubby little path up Springer Mountain, have you come to terms with that? Because it's going to be your epic finish. This is the culmination of your hike. So, I hope you're going to stay positive with that when you go up there.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for that. And when I think about it, I get a little bit emotional because, like you said, it is the end of my hard work of doing all those miles.
Sure.
And it is an accomplishment. And when I listened to your show from last week and after my segment, you said she's going to get down, whatever you said, get down to Springer, and then she's going to be a thru-hiker. And when you said that, I couldn't have smiled any bigger.
You sound like you're crying now, though.
Yeah.
It's an emotional thing. Aren't you surprised at how emotions have come out at the most unexpected times?
Unexpected, yeah.
It just hits you. It's just I had a few tears several times for no apparent reason. But something would strike you in a certain way, and you think to yourself, "Oh my gosh!" And you get a lump in the throat, and you're gone, aren't you?
Yeah,
you can't do anything about that. Oh dear me, nightmare.
Another weird time that happens to me is when I'm on an overpass and I pump my fist for the truck drivers to blow their horns, and they blow their horns, and it always chokes me up.
Oh dear,
crazy.
It's funny though. It does show you what it's like to abandon your existing life and go into an existence which is entirely different, isn't it? There's nothing you do at home that's like what you do here. You go hiking, but it's not the same thing as literally living on the trail for 5 or 6 months, is it?
No, it's not. It's definitely not.
Well,
I love it though. I love my tent and all that. So
you're comfortable in it. Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah. All right. Well, look, we'll catch up again next week. Keep on trucking. Enjoy the Enjoy the ponies and enjoy Damascus when you get there. I think you find that's a great little town. I don't know where you're going to stay, but I highly recommend My Friend Lady Dies. I don't even know whether she's still open at this time of year, but if she is, she's in Damascus and it's a great little place to stay.
Well, she just came highly recommended by two women I passed on the trail yesterday, so I had my eyes on that.
There you go. Yeah. Well, you can give her a kiss. Give her a kiss from me as well.
All righty.
All right then. Good talk to you then.
All right.
Cheers,
Take care.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.